I am. There's a lot of ash in the air because of the volcano that has erupted 2 islands to the east. So it is difficult to sing, a lot of phlegm, irritation. But I did, and I finished a walkabout today, and that was lovely. The walkabouts are pretty much my being duty of my life presently. So I can talk about them a lot. And at the same time, there are other things that are interesting in life, and those things are this life, the beauty of it, the deserving comfort that I have attained. And by comfort, I don't mean that I'm lying in a bed. The comfort is that I can create, do walkabouts, do these creative activities without any fear about not being able to do them. For many years, I've had a lot of fear about not being able to continue, not because of injury, not because of any physical incapacity, but because there wasn't enough money to repair my violin, or there wasn't enough stability to give me a environment to draw and write. At the moment, there is a comfort in my ability to be creative in the quaternity, and that feels very good. I have been considering not doing these talks, these discourses, mostly because they have no purpose to be broadcast and to be put on the internet. I still wonder if I should even list them for people to see. And that came as a result of receiving the toxic message of being disliked and hated. A lot mostly by family, but also by various people around. I can do a walkabout and I can see all the people who are loving me, but there are people who don't. And sometimes, depending on my mood, the people who don't take precedence over the people who do. The synchronicity of their messages get into my focus more deeply and more vividly than those who like. And of course, those who like are less voluble about it. People who like what you do are much less demonstrative. People who dislike what you do are much more demonstrative. And that's just the way it is. If you have a a product and people dislike it, they will come and they will do reviews and show more than the people who like it that they dislike it. And that's very true about creative works. People who dislike it will spend more time to tell you than people who like it. People who like it will like it and then just drift off. It is because of this that it is confusing for me. And mostly it's confusing if I have a mood that is difficult. There are a lot of flies around here right now. I'm not really sure why. They're all over the place. So they're very distracting. So it's very difficult when people dislike what you do because they show you very strongly. People dislike the videos more intensely. They'll show you and they'll write dislike. They'll click dislike. People who don't like what you're doing will walk out of your show. And that's much more activity than people who like, who will just sit there and then they'll disappear. So showing dislike is a much more activated behavior in humans. Showing liking is a much less active. They just take it in and take a phone video and take it away with them. And that's that. You never know anything more about them. Whereas people who dislike you will do all sorts of things to show their dislike. One of the things I really love about the Balinese is they show their like in beautiful smiles. So the smiles do trump, or I'm not going to have to figure out a new word. I have always thought about that, because the word Trump has now been usurped by a human being, so I can't even use the word anymore without having this being show up in my memory court, my memory center. But what I did experience is I did experience a lot of messages recently. In the last week, a week ago, a lot more messages of being disliked than messages of being liked. And it's just the way it was in that time. Again, I do these discourses as a gift to myself, mostly. So I usually don't need to, or I don't seek what and how they affect you or anybody. They are what they are. They are extemporaneous. I follow my thoughts. I follow my memories. I follow my visions. And I just flow with them, and they go where they go. Sometimes they're very dark. Sometimes they're very light. At this moment, I feel light. I'm talking about being disliked, but I can't talk about being disliked without being light. Because being disliked can feel very heavy-weighted. But I did a discourse last Wednesday, which is never going to be placed on the channel. It's very, very dark and very much saturated with feelings of death. Very saturated with disillusionment and so it's a little or a lot on the dark side of things. And it's a little bit more based in a erroneous realm than this one is. Because, as I said, everybody can dislike me as much as they want, but I am going to continue doing what I do. And their dislike of me will not affect me at all. In that regard, I will do it, and it's my being duty. It really is not affected by being disliked. What is affected by being disliked really is my mood. I just become very enmeshed in that feeling. And as I said, if my mood is in a difficult place, then it seeps in a very toxic way. It never destroys my creative path. It never gets in the way of my creative activities and my projects. It only affects my mood. The birds are playing and singing. If my mood is dark, they're still playing and singing, and I still observe them playing and singing. The snail crosses the leaf or hangs from the leaf. I saw 2 snails hanging from the palm fronds yesterday, and I find it really interesting how they hide themselves from the sun so that they don't get burnt to a crisp. Last night I took 3 snails off the road and threw them in the bushes so they wouldn't be trampled by people or scooters, because they always are. They're not moving fast enough to get out of the road, so there they are, and the scooter just squashes them. The sound of a snail being squashed is somewhat brittle and somewhat nauseating. The sound imitates or corresponds to the sounds of anything being crunched and crumpled and killed and destroyed. I find that the correspondence between the sounds of life and the sounds of creative sounds are very, very similar. Screaming is always the same. The meaning of screaming is that something fearful, something horrible has happened, and so a scream brings that to mind. A dog screaming, I heard a dog screaming yesterday. I think a scooter hit or trampled its leg, and it was screaming. It sounds like any human being screaming. It sounds like any car tire screaming when it's braking or when it's going into an accident. All sounds have a similar correspondence when they connect up with certain experiences. So to sing, to create music, to create sounds, is to pretty much call on that correspondence in life. Those things that are beatific have certain sounds that correspond in singing and music making, and one, in a sense, imitates them. One of the big mistakes of the atonal era was that they stopped doing that. They stopped making that correspondence so that a scream could, in their eyes or their feelings, be imitating something beatific, and it doesn't. There's nothing in life when one looks around that a scream is I'm going to have to adjust that a little. There is screaming in orgasm. There is screaming when one greets somebody one has not seen for a long time and one is happy to see them. Those screams differentiate. The scream of the dog having been hit by the scooter as opposed to the scream of a person seeing somebody who they have not seen from a long time, or the scream of surprise when they receive something that they love. They're different, and this type of scream is different. You can hear it in the way the dog is screaming, or the way the person is screaming as because they've been hit by something, or they're being kidnapped or murdered. It is not the same, and yet they are screams. They're full-voiced expressions. So when somebody responds to my singing in a certain way, they are also responding to my calling up the feelings that I have deep inside me that are true and honest. There is no, I would say, fakery in the expression. I feel it, it's there. And that also comes from a certain amount of technique, a certain amount of ability to do that and to know what that is that I'm calling up. And of course, there are those who hate it. As I have often said, you may hate how I make sounds with my voice. The woman next door hates it. I don't really know what the issue is for you or the woman next door or anybody who hates it. You are bringing to the sound an issue that you have, or she has, or they have. I am calling up the honest feelings that I have. Sometimes there is much pain in the softness of my singing. It is much, as the term is, piano, than some of the louder things that they're very happy and exultant, very loud. And yet there's pain in that soft sound. And somebody might find that to be more tolerant than the large, loud sound which they don't want to hear. In regards to those beings who are using music to make a loud sound and cause party to occur, they have no sense of this at all. They are just using thumpers. They are making it very loud, and the thumping then thumps people's bodies, and people then are moved to dance. They have no idea, and nor does the person who constructed that sound, who could be called a DJ or who could be called an electronic composer, do they know what they're doing? The connection between their emotions and what they make are nil, because the creation of electronic music does not have that kind of does not have that connection. They are more concerned with the template of tones, the use of loudness, and the mastering of their sounds to be as loud as they possibly can make them. So basically, they can thump somebody and try to spin that thumping. I call it spinning because that's what is used. That's the term that is used when one takes a incident and one turns it into a narration that can cause people to feel that that incident has a certain emotional impact. but it's actually the spinning that causes that. So you have spinning in the news, you have a conservative. Even the word conservative is confusing because I am extremely conservative. I conserve energy because I want to be a preformer, a walkabout preformer with my full energy used in my work. Liberal, I am not liberal because I do not just throw my energy here willy-nilly everywhere. And yet, politically, I am not a conservative. I am extremely open and fluid with beings, open to all beings of religion, critical of the religion itself, but open to those beings because I know they have been hoodwinked. So I am tolerant of their template, let's say, how they're been spun into this template. In any event, spinning these thumping pieces into something that is so-called spiritual is exactly what is wrong with Christianity. It's the same template. You make people think that you're doing something spiritual when it's just somebody turning up the volume of something really loud and using some bass drum as loud as they can. And it's not even really a bass drum, it is a bass drum sample, as loud as they can. And then that sound, because of its bass tonality, then thumps people and they think that they're receiving some sort of special baptism by thumping. Thus they dance, and dance to it quite wildly. Today during my walkabout, I played to a young man, sang into his eyes, and he danced with me. It was not thumping that I did to him. It was full emotional connection to him. Full emotional expression, which touched him and the rhythm of my foot and my feet beating with my voice, with my movement. And we danced together right at a intersection, one of my favorite intersections, right near Nirvana. The symbolism is not missed and is intended. I will always speak up when DJs are trying to claim they are doing a spiritual act. And I will speak up because I can pull their plug all the time. And if it's spiritual, you can't pull its plug. That is my argument with the word God. God is a word that you can pull the plug. And I will explain that. By pulling a plug, it makes it not possible for that expression to exist anymore. So an electronic musician, a DJ, whatever, using electronics, when they are playing, they're really loud and they're acting like they're playing something. They're closing their eyes and really expressing, seemingly. But if I go behind them and I pull the plug of their amplifier out of the wall, then there's suddenly silence. And that which they thought they were doing, and they're all of a sudden stopped. It's over. It's finished. Same with the word God. It's a limit, just like electronic. It's not a continuance. It's not an infinite word. It seemingly refers to something infinite, but what it refers to is it refers to a more powerful being than we are. Not an infinite being, a more powerful being. And my favorite powerful being or entity is the sun. The sun is life-giving, truly is life-giving. It truly is our holder because its gravity holds us in orbit. At sunset, I feel the sun missing. whereas God is a limited word, reversed as dog. I look at things that way too. I scan in both directions. So God and dog are the same word to me. Are they to you? So when you are referring to God, are you referring to dog too? Or not? Is that true or not? The only word that really works for me sometimes, and it doesn't fully, because as I said, it's limited. Allah is a reversible sound. Allah, Allah. It's Anya is also. For me, that shows that they exist in both directions, whereas God does not. God is dog, if one scans it from right to left. From left to right, it's God, and thus it's limited. Because it's limited, it doesn't refer to what it is, what people intend it to refer to. It is false. Thus, it doesn't exist, that which it's trying to refer to. I take the Tao, the first stanza of the Tao, the first part of the Tao, the first stanza, let us call it. And that refers to what I'm talking about so well. And that is why I love the Tao Te Ching, because of that stanza. The others are less clear and less purely intended as that first one. To name anything is the origin of particular things. This is really, really important. Naming ends the infinite nature of something, because the name is not infinite. The name is always about controlling something. So, in the name of is a very problematic statement. In the name of Jesus is false, because Jesus is not the name of the being who taught us the nature of Christ. Jesus is a name created by another being who wanted to sell the teachings of Yeshua to the Romans, and did so very well. Because as far as I'm concerned, Jesus is a Roman name. It's a Latin name. It was meant to enslave people. So now what we have is a slave religion that has its power in Rome. Even if people think of themselves as separate, and they call themselves Episcopalian or Lutheran or any number of things, to call themselves separate, their separation is not evident. The Roman Empire, it still exists. It still has control of so many people in the world. The Romans were one of the most powerful empires that ever existed on the planet. They were power hungry, they were controlling, they tortured a philosophical, beautiful being and put him on a cross, and then created a symbol to represent the fear that you should have if you follow the full truth that Yeshua talked about. It is a Roman Empire that all people who call themselves connected to them are involved in. It's a slave system. All people, even in their devotional state, which is false in themselves, but they will claim to be, even in their passion, they will claim this to be passion. They are passionate because they are enslaved by Romans. The Romans are the ones who are controlling this environment. They are the ones who are the slave holders. Are you a slave of the Romans?